Welcome in, everybody, to this Kansas City Chiefs live stream presented by Bleacher Report. I'm your host, Michael Darcy, and I'm joined by my co-host, Joey Segura. And over the course of the next 25 to 30 minutes, we are going to be going over some grades from the Kansas City Chiefs' 21-14 victory over the Miami Dolphins in Frankfurt, Germany. Joey, I know yesterday was kind of brutal. The game started at 8:30 in the morning, and for college students like us, Saturday night was a little bit hectic, but what were your initial thoughts from this win? I know it wasn't pretty, but the Chiefs are coming out of a different country with a win.
Yeah, I think that needs to be said too. Is the travel's tough? It definitely adds a different dynamic having to fly across the globe into a completely different time zone by a wide margin. So for them to go out there and handle business, I think was huge. And really, they looked okay. I think the Broncos game, it kind of felt like the world was falling a little bit, I think, for a lot of Chiefs fans. And naturally so. It was maybe the most embarrassing Patrick Mahomes-led game that we've had in this era. So, that was big. But I do think that it showed consistent signs about what we've been feeling all year. I think the defense was outstanding, and I know we'll touch on that as well. But I think the offense also is giving hope. I think it's kind of turning the corner. I think you can kind of see it a little bit. I think there's been a fire lit beneath these guys on the offensive side of the ball. But overall, a solid win. And to beat a team like Miami is always a good win.
I think the result of that game, just holding a Miami Dolphins offense that was widely regarded as one of, if not the best offense in the league, to 14 points was incredible, especially on the road in Germany, where, like you mentioned, the travel was definitely a big part of the slow offense on both sides, because the time difference, the practice schedule, I think they give both these teams the bye week this week. I know the Chiefs are on their bye week because when you have to travel to a different country, get acclimated to play in that game, it didn't work for everybody. But I also think that what we saw from this defense was able to kind of shore up some things offensively and give us, a little bit of more hope going forward. But with that being said, why don't we go over our initial grades from this game? Let's starting off with the defense. I think the Kansas City Chiefs defense deserves an A, or I guess an A-. The only reason I'm going to give them an A- is yesterday they did struggle to stop the run a little bit. They gave up 117 rushing yards, and Raheem Mostert in the fourth quarter got a ton of yards on the ground and almost made this game way closer than it had to be. So for that reason, I think it's an A-. But outside of that, they nearly played a perfect game. We're going to touch on the biggest play defensively, that Trent McDuffie forced fumble where Mike Edwards picked it up, tossed it to Brian Cook, who was able to just explode to the end zone to get that touchdown. You don't make that play, you don't win this game. And the Chiefs defense has been so good all year long. Yesterday against this Miami Dolphins offense was no exception. And I think that is such a big thing for this defense, because up until this point, you could kind of write it off like, oh, the Chiefs just didn't play any good offenses, and holding teams to sub 21 points really didn't mean anything because you weren't playing very high-powered offenses. But yesterday, against this Dolphins offense, which features Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill, Raheem Mostert, you held them to 14 points. And I think this is a statement win for the Chiefs defense, and that's why it's an A-.
Yeah, I agree. I think to come out and just really dominate on the defensive side of the ball – I mean, they kept Miami scoreless basically in the first half. So it was a great defensive outing. I think enough can't be said about L'Jarius Sneed's coverage on Tyreek yesterday. He did about as good of a job as you could do as on maybe the second best or best wide receiver in the National Football League. Obviously, he had a couple holds here and there, but I mean, what are you going to do when you're playing Tyreek Hill? But they were fantastic. The D-line continued to impress. They got pressure on Tua Tagovailoa. And the other thing, too, that was interesting going into this game is Miami has thrived at getting the ball out of Tua's hands very quickly. That's how they dominate. They use the speed of the receivers and also the running backs out in the flat a little bit here and there to just get the ball out very quickly and keep the defense on their toes. And they weren't really able to do it as well as they had been in prior weeks. So, I think the defense did their job. They played about as good of a game as you could ask for them. And obviously, there's some things that benefited us on the offense. I think Miami had some questionable play calling here and there, and also Jalen Waddle getting hurt at the beginning of the game. Regardless, I think he was basically okay after that. But man, I mean, the secondary is just so great. And to touch on that play, I love Mike Edwards, man. I mean, he is
He's a
just
dog.
such a pickup from Brett Veach. And he's a ball hawk. He's just, he's there in the right spot at all the times. Every time you meet him, he's there. He makes a play. So just these small pickups that Brett Veach had were, other teams go out and they load up with these stars and things like that. And Kansas City will make a splash here and there, but we kind of like to build through smaller guys. Amenahue's made a difference. Tranquil's been huge in the Nick Bolton absence. And Mike Edwards, it seems like every week Mike Edwards has at least one huge play that he contributes to or that he's a part of. So, you really can't say anything more about that. They were fantastic. They played about as good of a game as you could play. And this is the best defense, I think you could argue, that Andy Reid's had in Kansas City. It's definitely up there. When he first got there, when, we had Justin Houston and Eric Berry and guys like that. So it's a hell of a team. And really the impressive thing to me too with this defense is they're not star-studded. And I don't mean that in a negative way. There's not a ton of huge names on this defense. It's just a bunch of guys that play their role perfectly, and they're good football players.
I think the thing that makes this Chiefs defense so good is in years in the past, the pass rush has been good, but the secondary was horrible. Or the secondary was good, but the Chiefs couldn't force any pressure up front. The Chiefs are good in all three defensive phases. Their front four is great. Chris Jones is great in the middle, and their linebacking core has so much depth with Bolton, Tranquil. Leo Chenal had a sack in yesterday's game. Yeah. He's rushing the passer, but he's also a really good linebacker to have. And then Willie Gay. And your secondary, you got guys like McDuffie that have taken huge steps, Snead, Justin Reed's playing good football, Mike Edwards, who you've alluded to. The Chiefs are good in every defensive way. And, they might struggle stopping the run at times, but they still don't have a major weakness. And for that reason, this is the best Chiefs defense that Andy Reid has had, and it's definitely the best defense that Patrick Mahomes has had.
Yeah,
and that's a big thing because right now where the offense is trying to figure it out, your defense is winning you ball games. If the Chiefs didn't have, that crucial play that resulted in a touchdown, you probably don't win this game. And if, the Chiefs defense didn't stop the Dolphins late in the fourth quarter from scoring, we don't win this game either. So I do think it is worth pointing out also that the Dolphins scored 39 points per game. They averaged 39 points and 498.2 yards against losing teams and only 17 points per game and 309.7 yards per game against teams with a winning record. So it is kind of interesting to see how the Dolphins offense is great at beating up against the really bad teams. When they face a team with a good defense, they kind of struggle. And so I don't think that takes away from the Chiefs' defensive numbers at all, but it is interesting to see how, maybe the Dolphins aren't as good as they seem to be on paper.
Yeah, I think that's definitely an interesting thing to look at. And I think there are a great team, so don't get me wrong. They're very explosive, probably the most explosive team in the National Football League. But relatively speaking, they don't have a lot of playoff experience in the upper echelon of their team. I mean, Tua is playing fantastic. Don't get me wrong. A hell of a season to bounce back from all the concussion issues that he had last year. Very happy for him that he's having the season he's having. But he doesn't have a lot of playoff experience. And this is a team that I do think will be a threat for years to come. Yeah. But I'm not sure that they're quite there. They're not there just yet, I don't think. I think they're coming, but I'm not sure that they're there. And I don't know if you saw this. This is kind of going off a Tyreek quote. Tyreek was kind of saying this could be a new rivalry, and I saw a tweet about it. It is a little funny to me. The Chiefs at this point, the way I think you definitely know, we're the team in the National Football League. Every major rivalry in the NFL over the last 5 years has involved us. It's Josh Allen and the Chiefs, Joe Burrow and the Chiefs. Remember the little 2-year Ravens-Chiefs rivalry thing that we had going on, and so I think that says a lot about our team too. But the Dolphins, I think, are a good team. They're going to make some noise in the playoffs. I'm just not sure that they're ready to take over the AFC and dethrone teams like Kansas City or Buffalo, and Cincinnati will be there too, I'm sure. Yeah. So I'm not sure that they're ready for that.
That's a very fair take. I think I saw something that right now Buffalo is actually not in the playoffs, so they're going to have to do some work to get back into those standings. But I think to wrap this whole thing up, the Chiefs defense deserves a grade about an A-. I think that they would be perfect, but the rushing yards at the end of the game really did hurt. So I think an A- is a good grade. And I think, I'm coming out of this game like in Germany, feeling like the Chiefs defense proved something, and it's that they're legit. So I think that's a great sign. And moving forward, we're going to have to expect the same kind of dominance because they've got the pieces, and I think they're more than capable of doing that. Definitely. So the next thing that we are going to talk about is the Kansas City Chiefs offensive grade. And we might differ in our opinions on this one. Yeah, I think the Chiefs offensive grade's a C-. And the first drive was fantastic. The Chiefs marched down the field. They scored. Great. They did not score in the second half of this football game. They got up 21-0, in part to that Brian Cook touchdown on the fumble recovery. You scored 2 touchdowns in the first half, and you could not do anything offensively in the second half. And for that reason alone, I can't give them anything more than a passing grade. I actually looked it up. A passing grade in most college universities is a C-. The Chiefs offense got the passing grade. They did just enough to win this game, but they didn't do anything special. They didn't blow you away. We'll talk about some of the receivers later on in this video. Nothing about this Chiefs offensive attack outside of that first drive has me feeling any better about the current state of the Chiefs offense.
Yeah, and I think that's a totally valid and fair take to have. I kind of am going at it from more of a relative perspective. So I think we have to take into account what we saw happen last week. So it's been weird. Don't get me wrong, because we go from the Chargers game where they dropped, I forgot how many we dropped, but I know it was in the high 30s or low 40s. I can't remember the exact number, but regardless, the offense was potent that game. Mahomes threw for, 400 yards and a couple touchdowns. So, and then to go to Denver and not score at all, it's very frustrating. So I think we have to take it with a grain of salt. So you kind of have to take it from, okay, this offense is clearly trying to work through some things. And I think you can kind of start seeing it come around in that Dolphins game. That first drive, they were rolling. I mean, they just weren't stopped. It seriously was just domination. And then after that, it felt like they kind of went away from it. And so I think it's still very frustrating, but I think they're on the right track. And so I'd probably bump this grade up just a little bit, not that much different from what you have. Mine will probably be a C or a C+, just because I think that you can kind of see it a little bit. It's starting to get a little bit better. But I think the fact that they shut Kelsey down, and I think this is what we've been talking about all year, and this is a positive thing for the offense in my mind a little bit. Not that he got shut down, but Kelsey got shut down and they were able to win a game. So obviously, ideally, come playoff time, that's not the case, and Kelsey's the best in the world at what he does. But it's kind of somewhat easy to game plan when you really only have one major receiver to game plan for. So, but I think it showed that this offense is capable of holding their own, even when Kelsey's taken out of the equation. So, I still believe in this young Chiefs wide receiver core. I know we're going to talk about that next, so I'm not going to go too into that one. But I think that it showed signs. I think that they got the job done when they needed to. I think Isaiah Pacheco continues to be a great option. They said it on the broadcast. I really think Pacheco is a good enough football player that he could be your second option kind of guy. I mean, I really do. I think he is so dynamic of a threat in different ways and such a reliable player too, man. So I feel like we should lean into Pacheco more, but we'll get on that later too. So I'd give it a C or a C+. But I still think there's a lot of work to be had, but I think they're kind of turning that corner a little bit.
My issue with it is, if you compare this offensive performance to last week's offensive performance, it is better because you were terrible last week. You didn't even score a touchdown. So if you're comparing this week to last week, sure, they've been better. But I think when you look at the offense overall, they've solved none of the problems. Travis Kelce is still going through these injury problems, and since he does get shut down, it forces somebody else to step up. And I don't want to talk about it too much because we are going to talk about the Chiefs wide receivers, but the Chiefs just lack the, not even explosiveness. They just lack the consistency on offense, and that's why I'm so concerned, because it feels like the Chiefs are trying to work through this problem, and us Chiefs fans are just waiting for them to break through. And it's almost getting to a point where I'm starting to be concerned about the fact that there might not break through. And that's a problem because, your defense is elite, but how long can you bank on your defense showing up, making plays, and winning you football games until the offense finally has to do something? And listen, the offense did just enough to win yesterday. And against the Dolphins team that is one of the better teams in the AFC, I would take that. But again, you got to look at it from a perspective of improvement. And are the Chiefs going to be good enough offensively 4 or 5 weeks in the future? Are we going to see any change? Because we've been talking about how the Chiefs have struggled offensively for the last 9 weeks. It's been 9 weeks, and we have seen no improvement. At a certain point, the Chiefs' offense is just going to be this bad. That's just what it's going to be. And so I don't want to say that I'm losing hope, but the timeline of, my optimism is running out very shortly.
Yeah, definitely. I think that the leash that we kind of had this offense on, where it's like, okay, we're not going to panic just yet, is starting to end. I definitely agree with that. I think we're kind of coming up where it's getting a little bit more nerve-wracking. Like, I think the pressure's starting to build, but I think the guys feel that, and I'm not sure how this young wide receiver core is going to deal with that. Obviously, we don't know how a lot of them are wired in terms of that kind of response. We know how Kelsey's wired. We know how Mahomes is wired. We know how Andy Reid is wired. And these guys want nothing but success. And I really think a lot of these guys in this locker room are built like that too. I think when you build a team with the mindset of nothing but winning, it's legacy. Kelsey's talked about it before. He could have gone elsewhere and been paid a huge bag. Or Kansas City could have given him one, and he declined that because he wants to build his legacy. He wants to try to be one of the greatest players to ever play football, and he's doing that. So I think that's all that they care about. But I do think that it's getting a little bit more nervous. The pressure is definitely building up, and they probably only have a couple more weeks left before the media labels it as it's over. Like, this is where this is just how the offense is going to be.
And we're just going to have to be patient. We'll find out. But I think that I've really never felt this way about an Andy Reid-led offense. And I think that's partially concerning because the offensive struggles, in my opinion, are partially to blame on Andy Reid, which we will talk about in this live stream. Definitely. Partly Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, and the wide receivers. So it's really a complete team issue that they're facing right now. And those aren't issues that you can necessarily fix in a matter of weeks. So I think that's definitely something to take a look at. And another thing, Miami's defense gives up 25 points per game nearly every week. And the fact that you couldn't do that,
not good.
Again, concerning. But the Chiefs have been playing down to competition and not doing not doing well offensively for the past couple weeks now. So it's what I expect at this point. But I think to kind of wrap it up, the offense deserves a C-. That's the passing grade. They did enough to win, but they're not going to impress anybody from that performance yesterday. Yeah, no. Now, the next thing we're going to talk about, I'm excited to talk about this one. Let's talk about the Kansas City Chiefs wide receivers and give them a grade. I think the wide receiver core yesterday deserves a D. And the reason they don't deserve an F is because they won this game, and you got to give them credit for that. Yeah, that's where the optimism and the congratulations dies. The Chiefs wide receivers were horrible yesterday. In fact, Noah Gray was your leading receiver yesterday. He had 3 catches for 34 yards. That is your leading wide receiver. That's a problem. That is a very big problem. But Joey, what are your thoughts? Am I too harsh on the wide receiver core? I really don't think I am.
No, I don't think so either. I think the issues that have plagued us this whole season is they're not getting separation. And at this point in time, I'm not sure that there's a single wide receiver on this roster that's capable of getting separation at a consistent level. And that hurts your offense. They don't have any deep threat like that. And I think you saw it's one of those things where it confuses you a little bit because it's like Sky Moore can show little flashes here and there of being able to, get in the soft zone of a defense and things like that. And he can get some separation. He just struggles. But I mean, it's just like you see Mahomes standing there with the football, and what is he supposed to do? Nobody's getting open. There's no separation. So, and Chiefs Red Pens UT said it right here. Mahomes probably has the strongest pocket presence that he's had his entire career. He's protected. This is one of the best O-lines in football, and they can't take advantage of it because they don't have receivers that can get separation. I really think we've kind of given up on the Kadarius Toney thing. I think I've kind of hit that point where it's been dying, but Kadarius Toney, I think, has been one of the biggest letdowns in recent Chiefs history in terms of a player. Like, I think he's up there with Breeland Speaks type stuff, man. But I just think it's tough. And like I said, I hate to rag on them too much because I'm a fan. I'm going to support these guys through everything. You know, I hope they figure it out. But I don't understand how Tony's not able to figure anything out with the talent that he has, the fact that he can't get into separation. And we're going to, like I said, we're going to talk about it next, but I wonder how much of that is a little bit of play calling, a little bit of the, because at the end of the day, we can't ignore that as well. But not to rag on him, I'll kind of change my tone a little bit and go to a more positive view. Man, Rashee Rice is that guy.
Yeah.
Rashee Rice for a rookie wide receiver is just so much further along than he should be. It's great. He is just a dog. I mean, he is like Isaiah Pacheco as a wide receiver. When he gets that football, I mean, that play where he scored the touchdown, he just caught it basically in the flat right there. He just turned around and caught it and just took it. He bulldozed his way. So I think Rashee Rice is a great wide receiver. I think that's a guy that you have to build around. Whether he has the potential to be a wide receiver number one or not, we don't know. But definitely, I think at minimum in his career, if it continues this way, he's going to be a wide receiver 2 type guy. So
right now, he's your wide receiver 1. Rashee Rice, as a rookie, is your go-to guy, the number 1 guy at wide receiver, which nobody expected coming into this season. And one thing that I want to talk about Kadarius Toney, because genuinely, like you said, I don't understand how a player the caliber of Kadarius Toney is having trouble seeing the field. I wonder if it's maybe an injury that he's trying to work through and they're trying to maybe manage his workload. I'm not sure. So Pete Sweeney of Arrowhead Pride released the snap counts from yesterday's game. Rashee Rice had 41 snaps. Justin Watson had 38 snaps, being the second leading receiver in snaps, which is kind of wild. Marquez Valdes-Scantling had 33. Sky Moore had 15 snaps. Hardman had 13. And the final wide receiver is Kadarius Toney with 7 snaps. He saw 7 snaps on the field yesterday and caught 1 ball for 18 yards. Only was targeted once. And when he caught the ball, he made a difference. But for some reason, Kadarius Toney cannot find his way on the football field in maybe the worst wide receiver room, at least in Patrick Mahomes' career, and probably one of the worst wide receiver rooms in the NFL. They've been that bad this season. And the fact that a guy like Kadarius Toney, who was so good last year in such a short sample size, can't even get onto the football field this year, crazy. The alarm bells are going off because that is just unacceptable.
Absolutely.
MBS, go ahead.
No, I was going to just say, I think, too, I wonder how much of it is Mahomes' trust in Kadarius Toney. You know what I mean? I wonder if that plays a part in it, because otherwise I can't think of anything else. Like you said, I mean, I don't think it's an injury, or it's just he's just not that good, but the talent's there. So it's very frustrating.
Well, one of the things also why he was traded from the New York Giants, he fell asleep in the meeting rooms. And I wonder how much of that is maybe going on in Kansas City. This is just speculation. But maybe he just doesn't have a very good grasp on the playbook because he just hasn't devoted that much time to it. But I don't really want to speculate about that. But it is interesting that a guy like Kadarius Toney, who has all the talent in the world, can't find a way to even play more than 7 snaps. That's concerning. But MVS, a veteran wide receiver, he hasn't been good this year. Mahomes is still like, hey, man, you got to come back to the football. That's an issue. Sky Moore has been a major disappointment. Outside of Kadarius Toney, Sky Moore has been a bust. And that is a very, very unfortunate thing because you spent a very high asset on him to draft, and he hasn't worked out. And so the Chiefs wide receiver room as a whole, and specifically yesterday, I mean, man, you got to do better. Noah Gray cannot be your leading receiver with 34 yards. I don't even understand how we even won this game, let alone what were we doing on our offensive drives? Like, we didn't run the ball well. No. We didn't throw the ball well. How did we even win this game to begin with?
Yeah, it's a frustrating situation all around. I think I know Andy Reid said he trusts the guys that are in the building, but I mean, what else is he supposed to say? He's not going to come out and say, oh, man, you're not going to pull a Dion and say that his players suck. So, I don't know. I don't know what to do from here. I think you just kind of got to hope that the play calling improves and that the receivers are able to get separation to improve this offense at all.
I agree. I think yesterday's performance was definitely disappointing, but at the same time, we've been disappointed by this Chiefs wide receiver room all year, and for that reason, they get a D from yesterday's game. The next thing that we're going to talk about, I think, has been on a lot of Chiefs fans' minds, and that is the Chiefs short yardage play calling. And for that, we give Andy Reid and Matt Nagy an F. The Chiefs short yardage situational awareness this year has been baffling. It has been horrendous. And yesterday, the play that comes to mind is late in the fourth quarter. It was 3rd and 1. The Chiefs dropped back to pass. Keep in mind, I think there was like 4 minutes left in the game. If the Chiefs would have gotten like a couple more first downs, you don't even have to give the ball back to the Dolphins offense. You win the game. You don't even have to put that game in the hands of your defense. And Andy Reid on 3rd and 1 has Patrick Mahomes drop back to throw. Travis Kelce, who was getting blanketed all game long, wasn't open. Shocker. On 3rd and 1, they covered the best receiver on the field. They ended up having to punt the ball back to the Dolphins offense. And thank God our defense bailed us out. But again, the short yardage play calling continues to be a problem. They were horrendous yesterday, but that was the biggest example that came to mind.
Yeah, definitely. And it's the same thing to me in the end of the Broncos game when it was 3rd and 1. And we knew 3rd and 2, I believe, or 3rd and 3. And we knew we were going to go for it on 4th down because you had to at the end of the game. And they just didn't run the football. And don't get me wrong. I've been a very big proponent of you're the best player on the planet under center. Don't take the ball out of his hands. But there's certain cases. That was last year and the years before where I would argue we really didn't have a consistent run game yet. Our interior O-line was not great. Now you have, in my opinion, the top 3 interior O-line in the National Football League. You have a running back that's a capable 1,000-yard rusher, and that is a bruising running back. If it's 3rd and 1, just put the ball in his hands. And if you lose, so be it. And Andy said that after the game too. He said he knew if he had that call again, he would do it differently, and he would probably put the game in the hands of the O-line and Pacheco there at the end. But I mean, when you watch that 3rd and 1 play, and I saw McKinnon lined up in the backfield, I was like, well, here we go. So
the problem is
just
frustrating. Say that Andy Reid always says that. Oh yeah, I should have done it differently. Yeah. It's on me. Exactly. Until we see him do it differently, this is just what it's going to be. Yeah. And that's why I think it's so frustrating, is because it's not like this is a one-off thing. Andy Reid does some dumb stuff like this in short yardage situations in critical moments, seemingly in every game. And it's become a problem. So I think for that reason, the short yardage play calling, and specifically Andy Reid's calling, because I don't care what anybody says, Andy Reid is calling the plays. Matt Nagy is not doing anything.
If Chiefs fans want to use Matt Nagy as the cop-out, they can, and I think that's totally unfair to Matt Nagy. I think Matt Nagy is a capable offensive coordinator. He was a solid head coach to an extent. I think he got a bad deal. But I really don't think Matt Nagy's the one to put all the blame on in this situation. Obviously, he's going to take some of it, but Matt Nagy's a good coach, man, and so is Andy Reid. I'm not saying he's not. Andy Reid is a Hall of Fame head coach. Don't get me wrong. But there's little things that you can improve on. And when it's 3rd and 1 and games on the line, yeah, I really do believe Andy Reid's the one calling the plays there. So it's just something they have to improve on in that regard, and hopefully they will soon.
I think they will. Hopefully they will. For my heart, I hope they do. But for that reason, yesterday, the Chiefs' short yardage play calling grade, they get an F. The final thing we're going to talk about, maybe the most intriguing storyline leading up to this game, it's Tyreek Hill. The Tyreek Hill grade from this game, and also looking back at the trade, we're going to give it a B. I think the Chiefs really benefited from that trade, and that is crazy to say because at the time, it seemed like the world was ending and the sky was falling. Yeah. But not only did the Chiefs benefit from that, getting a first-round pick that they ended up using on Trent McDuffie, that very same guy that they drafted with the pick that they got for Tyreek Hill, forced the fumble that changed this game. If Tyreek Hill does not fumble that ball in that moment and you don't get that defensive touchdown, you probably don't win this football game. So it's just kind of ironic that, at the end of the day, Tyreek Hill still helps the Chiefs win even when he's not on the team.
Yeah, I think when you look at the trade, I would give it, I think a B is a very fair grade. And it could be even higher if Sky Moore, lived up to the potential, because then you would have, in my mind, a guy who's Trent McDuffie is a potential all-pro level cornerback future in his way off of his career. So if you have Sky Moore being a capable wide receiver, I think it'd be an A. But it was a trade that was necessary. And somebody in the comment section said it earlier. I can't remember the username, so I apologize for that. But they basically said it's going to keep us in the free agency market. And that's what Brett Veach told us too. He said, yes, we could have technically re-signed Tyreek, but it would have taken us out of free agency for the next 2 to 3 years at least. And if that happens, all of a sudden, if your team stalls or there's issues, you can't fix anything. This offseason, if we hadn't been able to get a Menahue, Tranquil, and Mike Edwards, this defense could be a lot different. So they trusted Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce, and I think they made the right call trading for him. And I do want to say quickly here before we, kind of wrap it up, but the Chiefs fans hate a Tyreek Hill. I'm not sure really how many there are that do. I think it's foolish. The man won us the Super Bowl. He's maybe the greatest wide receiver we've ever had. He's a Hall of Famer that's a Kansas City Chief. He won a ring here. He didn't owe us anything. He deserved to go get his bag and go live in Miami where he wanted to live. If we hadn't won a ring, it'd be a whole different story, but he did his job. He brought a championship and another AFC championship to Kansas City, and that's all we can ask for. So I really do think the Chiefs fans hate Tyreek Hill because he says things, which is clearly just to get views on his podcast. It's foolish. Let's not have another repeat of Tony Gonzalez where we hated a Chiefs legend because he said one or two things that rubbed us the wrong way.
Yeah, I agree with all that. Tyreek Hill is a legend in Kansas City, and just because he's playing in Miami does not change anything that he's done for this city and this franchise. So to wrap up the Kansas City Chiefs Week 9 grades, the defense gets an A-. I think that they played fantastic and really proved that they are legit. The offense gets a C-. They did enough to pass, but quite frankly, they just were not good enough, but they had to improve. The wide receivers core gets a D. Again, they've just lacked consistency all year, and they just leave a lot to be desired that they have to improve on. The short yardage play calling situations gets an F. They have to improve simply and point blank. And then finally, the Tyreek Hill trade gets a B. It's worked out so well for the Kansas City Chiefs, and it's why they were able to be so successful this season and in the future. So with that being said, guys, thank you for watching this Bleacher Report live stream. Again, the Kansas City Chiefs beat the Miami Dolphins yesterday in Frankfurt, Germany by a final score of 21-14. Until next time, guys, thank you for watching this Kansas City Chiefs live stream presented by Bleacher Report.